What's up? This is Carcino, and this is the truth behind the breakup of Married with Children, or the truth behind the Married with Children breakup, whichever way you want to see it. Now, when Married with Children came out, I believe in 1987, the thing about Married with Children was that the show was written around an Italian family. If you listen to how Al Bundy sounds in the first episode, they were writing it to make it like an Italian type family. Everything about Al was basically Italian. And it was funny. So it was weird the way they had Al talking because they basically was making it and bending the Bundys around this Italian family, and it was just completely hilarious listening to the way Al was talking during that time. Now, no one thought the show would go to the heights that it did. Okay, it went to one of the top shows before. People liked it because people were trying to boycott it and going through these, the motions that they was going through. Now, David Falsino, Ed O'Neill, Katie Seagal, Christina Applegate, and then you had Amanda Burst and the guy that played Steve. Now, Ron Levitz, one of the creators of the show, took a chance on her when Amanda Burst, who played Marcy. So when Marcy came on the show, it was like we're taking a chance with an unknown all the way. But she had the most experience where people have seen her. She had been in soap operas. She had been in the movie Fright Night, the movie Protocol, but she was the main girl in Fright Night. Out of all the things she's done, Fright Night was it. But she hadn't really worked too much since that time. And then they did a Fright Night sequel, and she wasn't even in it. So, if that wasn't telling. Now you have a situation in which you're dealing with all of these like crazy situations now because you have a hit sitcom. It's starting to blow. So you have people who came in and was very happy with just getting a job. Now they're expecting things, and now they got to talk to my agent, and is this direction we really want to go in? Now, when they did Married with Children, it always was about the family. So the Al and his family would always be on the cover. But pretty soon they started to unofficially, and they would add the Rhodes in as well in the later seasons. They would go ahead and put in other people in the story. Now, Married with Children went through a couple of snags along the way, like every other hit show. When this show hit off, the guy that plays Steve Rose, he's a Broadway guy. He loves theater. That's why he always talked about it. It was always his character. So when you see him, he was always that guy who loved theater and loved doing this. So he would always run back and forth, do some theater work, come back and do Married with Children. He was great in theater. So now that you had Buck the dog and this family, Al represented the real family of what was going on. But then the problems started to ensue. It got worse and worse and worse and worse. It just started to break and tear down the fabrics of people being together because they were growing up. You started to see a deterioration in the friendship of what started. Now, Amanda Burse is gay. It was no shock to nobody on the set. She was gay when she got there, but her outside life was starting to affect her real one, meaning her job. Now, the guy who played Steve Rhodes and everything else, everything was going great and there was no problems. And then after the season was over, it was time for renegotiation for a new contract. He wanted more money. As he started to get popular, he felt like, hey, I need more money here. From what I'm getting paid, I'm not saying I need Al Bundy's money, but I'm going to want extra money here. I've been here 4 seasons. It's time. And they said no to it all. And he walked away. Completely walked away from the show. And that kind of put the show in a little bit of a spin. Now, Amanda Burse, who was dating another woman at that time, not the one she's with now, but she's dating a couple of girls, and so she'll have her days where the mood change, and now the script is changing. The script is now gonna change for her character because he's not coming back. And because he's not coming back, that led to a lot of issues and problems within the storyline and how it was going to change and how they were going to have to make a rewrite of what her character was going to be. Now, acting for her was going to be secondary as she became more involved in the direction of the show. She wanted to be like, okay, I'm going to direct this. I want to be behind the camera. So they let her direct some episodes. And when they started letting her direct some episodes, we started to see there was what we would call a changing of the guard. Some shows were, headbutting with Al because they had one way of making the script, and now the script is kind of bending where it was so like they felt too misogynistic at certain points. They felt like, well, let's kind of do something that empowers the woman here. And Al was like, well, Peg wins all the time. Like, Al gets his butt kicked in every episode. So why do you want to change the way it goes now? So eventually, she'll be in a bad mood, probably because of one of her dates or whatever happening over there. And because of it, it turns into other things all the time. You're like, well, what's happening here? The episodes were changing, and you noticed it. Kids they can't do a little of the cute kid stuff when the kids are growing up, and the kids are what going to be the backbone of the story. They're going to keep it fresh for the younger generation that's watching it, who can relate to some of the things that Bud's doing and Kelly's doing. Kelly's the teen going out on dates, but how long can you keep her as the teen that's going out on dates and the perverted son who was Bud. And David Faustino's character was just like Bud Bundy. That was him. And his life was a spiral. And they would add it to the script. Him making fun of him being a rapper, Grandmaster B, because he had a rap group outside of Married with Children, they wrote it into the script. Them making fun of him being Grandmaster B and all this stuff. And it was good for an episode, but it was just not meant for it just didn't fit the storyline. Didn't need to be. So now that they got a new guy in, Jefferson, who comes in and swindles her out of her money, and now her name is Marcy Darcy instead of Marcy Rhodes. And she's on the show for a couple of episodes, but there's a lot of tension on the set between her and the main star, Ed O'Neill, who plays Al Bundy. He would point out some things and facts, and she felt he was more like the character Al Bundy. She's like, oh, he's a great actor, but he thinks a lot like Al Bundy. Like, she thought him playing this role was starting to rot his brain mostly. And some of the decision making because he's stubborn in his ways. He's stuck in, the caveman type of mentality. So when they would insult each other on the show, it was like she would like really lay it in thick because they would be arguing behind the scenes. And some episodes, she wasn't even in. She was just like, I'm going to be behind the camera on this one. I'm going on they could just say I'm on vacation for this episode. But she was directing it and trying to tell him and direct him in a situation and the way she wanted it to go, and he wouldn't respond. So they got in a serious arguments, and Al was like, told her one time, like, you're not that bright. Because I can go up in that studio and say, get rid of Amanda Burse, and you're gone. You can't go up to the director, to the president of the company, or Ron Levis, and anybody, the producers, and say, you know what, I can't do this no more. Al's got to go. So you're not that bright. So this was in the latter parts of the show. So when this was going on at the time, Katie Seagal was back on board fully because Katie, she hung out with biker gangs all the time. She used to take David Faustino with all these crazy biker gangs, and her and Christina Applegate got very close, as far as that, because she didn't know Katie Seagal was just a rebel like that. Like, she hung out with bikers. So she was putting her bum on the back of a bike a lot. Motorcycles and all that. So David Faustino hung out with her one time, and this was just not his mix. He was way too young to be going and hang out with her. So her and Christina Applegate, got close. And for David Faustino, it was hard to work with Kelly because he had a crush on her the whole time. He was crushing on her the entire time. So as he started to get older and he's crushing on her, it's just like, like, man, this is something else, like, then he had a ton of girls once he hit his teens, but once he was growing up, you know, there it was. And then came season 7 when they had to bring in a kid because Katie Seagal, her and her boyfriend, she was having her baby, and they decided to write the baby into the script. So they had it that Peg was pregnant. They were going to write, the Bundys were getting another child. And once they did that, and they tried to write this baby into the script, it ruined everything. Because everybody was set up with this baby, and Marcy was having a baby at the same time. So it was going to be 2 babies on the show, and all of a sudden the script was thrown away because she had a miscarriage. So they threw away Marcy's character having a baby, her and Jefferson. And the whole script and the whole season was over. It was like Al had a dream, Peg was pregnant and having a baby, and she wasn't. So now Marcy's not pregnant, Peg's not pregnant, but they want to bring a baby on the show since they prepared it. So in comes 7. They get Buck is gone. They got the new dog Lucky, who got, and Buck's spirit has been sent back. And now Lucky the dog is there as Buck goes into retirement. Now, 7 arrives, and 7 just didn't work. The kid just. People who were watching the show was wondering, like, why did they force this kid in this family, and it just doesn't fit. They had some funny episodes, it just didn't fit. And in their 7th season, they got 7. And it just didn't fit. So they had to cut the kid out. Ooh, sorry about that. All together. So they went right back to the original script. Things was going good, and then it just imploded. It was so many fights. A fight over who's changing things on the set, where they got set up for shots, Amanda versus outbursts. And the thing is, she was changing the character. When Marcy first started, she was this feminine woman, strong, independent businesswoman who dressed in dresses, kept her hair, looked more feminine. And, and as the show changed, she started to look more masculine and was the more masculine one. And I'm just talking about in character on the show. Her character changed. And her being the more dominant, like super overly, instead of independent, supporting woman, she became the dominant one over Jefferson. Whether it was money and everything else, she was just dominant, very masculine. And it changed the show entirely. Because she went from this woman that you might see next door to the short buzz cut, and you're like, okay, we gonna have to work with this. And not the girl we remember from, Fright Night. Fright Night would have been 2 minutes long. She'd been like, help me, he got me. And be like, I'm gonna go over there. I'll make some calls. But I'm not going over to that house. I already got warned. I ain't moving. So when show, I think at its end, she got married or something. She didn't invite Ed O'Neill and David Faustino. She felt those two, would laugh at her and all of these things at her wedding because her and her girlfriend was going down the aisle in matching tuxedos. So they didn't get an invite. Terrible. So all of a sudden, when all of this happened, Ed O'Neill, everybody's moved on. Everybody was supposed to be still, kind of over all these things because they had so many years together, over 10 years, working with somebody, a couple of fights ain't going to break it up. But it just was like, wow, really? We're being this petty now? Okay. So that's where the gist of everything was at that point. It was like, this is where we at with it, fellas. Get on board with it. The petty train is still moving. So that's what people were forced to do. Get on board with it. Even if they didn't want it, it didn't fit, they had to get on board with it. Now, David Faustino and her, they only had a couple of blow ups because Ed O'Neill was definitely like the father figure to David. So when they were blowing up on the set, then he would rebelliously, you know, talk back or do some things to tick her off and, would take Ed O'Neill's side in the situation where Christina Applegate and Katie Seagal, they were mostly neutral in there and trying to keep everybody from going crazy. Because Ed O'Neill and David got each other. That was his on-screen father, but still, he treated him like a dad. Like they got each other, the behaviors, everything. So I say that to only say this. Married with Children is still one of my favorite shows of all time. I love the character of Al Bundy and everything that happened there. And definitely, if they did a reunion show, I would have loved to seen everything work out. But because people are now older, they go different ways. When you get older, you just want to be around people that make you happy. And a show like Married with Children couldn't work today in today's time because everybody is so different. What was great then wasn't be great now. And this is not to attack Amanda Burst. And people feel that it is. It isn't. Amanda Burst was great. She was great as Marcy Rhodes, Marcy Darcy. The same thing was just that when her appearance started to change, her attitude started to change on the show from what she was to how she acted on the show. And once that happened, then you started to see it in her character. No more with the dresses, you saw more like man-like suits. It was her character and who she was in life was starting to come out here. It was no different when they did with Grandmaster B. But that wasn't working. So if that wasn't working, we don't need we don't need everything else to, go, in the way that it did. I hope I'm saying this right. I'm trying to be politically correct here when I'm saying this. Making these decisions go the way that they were going was going down a dangerous slope. You don't want this to happen, in other words. You don't want this to be the way you are remembered as your character. You don't want to, that's the thing. When you change your outside life, well, your character must stay the same or on the same wavelength as the show. Once your personal life starts to implement your work life, and the people can see and notice that, then, it's bringing forth a lot of changes. And she was very one of those, and as you could tell from the wedding invitation, this was the beginning of the end for the show because she was very like dominant and protective and dealing with the fact that she was a lesbian. She had to defend, and protect her, her lover and herself. She didn't want to be ridiculed, laughed at, or nothing. And she kind of felt like they would snicker and laugh at the fact, even though they know she's gay all these years. It was just things that you don't bring onto the set. So if anybody's watching this, you might get on a television show one day. Your outside life, don't let it affect your professional life. Once that starts to affect your professional life, you've lost the character. You lost who the character is. You got to realize you are not those people. You are portraying these people. You have to remember that. You have to embrace the fact that this is what the show is and this is what life is. And once you start to lose that, then you lost the character. So, on that note, I think we're done here. Love, married with children. Love and oh yeah, donate to the page. Click the link in the description box where it says donate. Leave me a message. I'm out.